This week on Eastbound and Down, travel back in time to the year 1764 as we discover the ruins and history of the iron-making industry in the state of Pennsylvania. So join Blue and I on this episode of Eastbound and Down. Welcome everybody to a snowy day in Pennsylvania. Yeah, that's right, snow. November 16th. We had about an inch, 2 inches up here on the southern mountains down in southeast Pennsylvania. But we're coming to you today from a really cool piece of history that I'm just learning about now, which I find completely fascinating. We're here at the furnace, the Pine Grove Furnace State Forest. In this state forest is an historical site, which just so happens to be along the Appalachian Trail, which this paved road actually is part of the Appalachian Trail. But it's a really cool history down here, where back in the 1700s they used to make iron down here, and they made iron for potbelly stoves, cast iron ware, steel back fireplaces, all types of stuff like that. They had a furnace out here, and what they used to do is they used to form communities, and the communities themselves would have like a furnace master, and they would have forges, and they would have people that would work the iron ore, and they would make all the stuff. And it was a really neat setup that they had here. See, there's Appalachian Mountain, Mount Katahdin, 1,000 miles, which is pretty cool. There it is right there, Appalachian Trail. That right there is the old mill house, which they've now turned into the Appalachian Trail Museum. Pretty cool. I don't think they're open today, but I think it's a seasonal thing. But a very cool spot. Look at the stonework on that. Beautiful building. Anyways, so here they used to have these little communities, like a little village. And they would have buildings, and it would be like a little town, and people would be housed here, and they had a general store. They had all types of stuff here. And what they used to do is they used to forge pig iron, like I said before, for all those commodities back in the 17 and 1800s. You know, this one started in 1700, late 1700s, and some of these furnaces went all the way up into the early 1900s. You know, England was doing a lot of them too. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you on this tour of this place, show you some of the old buildings, little history, just a really neat place. And then we're going to go check out the furnace, because the furnace is still left behind in there. I don't know if you can see in there. That's the top of it. So here there would be buildings, and from here they would load up into the top there. They would load your iron ore, your charcoal or coal, anthracite coal, which is mined right here in Pennsylvania, limestone, and then they would make your pig iron there. Really cool history. But this here is the old general store from the township that they had here. And there was a general store, and it just so happens that the general store itself is still the general store. It's still a general store, and it caters to through hikers on the Appalachian Trail. This just so happens to be the halfway point of the Appalachian Trail for through hikers. Here they would come and they would do the it's called a half-gallon challenge. So they come here, eat a half a gallon ice cream, you know, so much time to eat it, and you know, they'd get supplies and they'd rest here and stuff like that. But super cool. If you notice, old building, the recessed old windows with the iron bars, which were probably forged right here. Really cool. Yeah, well, the general store's closed. But, which was neat, connected to the store used to be the stables for the community. You know, they used to have horses here and wagons and stuff, so this was the actual stables for this little township, village, whatever. Super neat. Yeah, and they got a sign here. Stable. I don't know if we can see in. There's probably not. No. Really neat. And these are all original buildings, so you can see how everything was just a little, like a little community here. That building that I'm showing you right now was the pay office. So everybody that worked here would go there, probably on Fridays, and get their pay. Pretty convenient to have your pay office right in the areas that you lived. So that's the pay office. I think I was reading somewhere that says that you can rent, if you're like on the Appalachian Trail, you can rent that as a cabin for yourself, that's pretty cool in itself. Also on site here, so these places, they all had like forge masters, like the head guy, and that building right there was his mansion. Right now that's actually a hostel for the Appalachian Trail hikers, so you can stay there for a night or two, get some rest. But here, super neat, a little bit of history on all the buildings and stuff like that. Very cool to see. Yeah, so let's take a look at some of these buildings on the property, and I will compare like before and after photos of them. Be a really neat comparison to see how it used to be here over 200 years ago. And here it is, the Pine Grove Furnace, which, no pun intended, fired the Industrial Revolution. Like I said before, they made a lot of pig iron here, and I'll explain to you why they call it pig iron, but they made a lot of pig iron. Fireplace backings, potbelly stove, cast iron pots and pans, and this is what it looked like back in the day when it was in use. There would be a little building off to the right, and they had water that came down through a water wheel. And you say water and fire, like what's the point? But the water actually turned a bellows, and in turning the bellows, that bellows to a fireplace, it just made it super hot, up to 3,000 degrees. So fucking cool. And let me again, we had our first snowfall of the season, and not the greatest day to be doing this, but I'm only here once, so yep, here's a little documentation of the workers that worked here. But yeah, super neat. Let's get a little closer to this. So like I said, they had they rebuilt the inside. Some of them, they're so decayed now, over 200 years old, that the inside brick lining is gone. So essentially what would happen is they would load this sucker up with iron ore, limestone, charcoal or anthracite coal. They'd all load it from the top, and it would yeah, it would just burn down, burn down, burn down, burn down. And then here, it would come out into a small channel. And what they would do is it would run out into a channel, which is probably covered over by this walkway and stuff. The channel would come out and it would look like a pig feeding its piglets, hence the name pig iron. So it would have little outfits, and guys would come down here and they'd work it, and then they would take that raw iron ore and they'd bring it to a blacksmith or a forge, and then he would forge it into like the pots and the pans and stuff like that. So essentially, see the ruins right here? So essentially you had these ruins, which there was a water wheel here, and then they had water coming through, and their bellows, if you look up at the top, you look up way up there, so they would have bellows running in here and just keeping this sucker going, 3,000 degrees, and it would just melt. And you can see here another section of the furnace, really cool. But it, yeah, it would melt that iron ore. And iron ore, you got to remember, it has a parent material, and when the iron would be melted and separate from it, it would leave slag, and at the very bottom, it would leave the remnants of what they call salamanders, and it's a very glassy looking material, but it's the byproduct of all the stuff that melts out with the iron ore. And that's why they would use limestone. Limestone would create a reaction, and in that reaction the limestone would bring the slag up to the top, and they could scrape it off. Now I think there is yep, right here. So this is a salamander. This is what would be at the bottom of that furnace. It would sit at the bottom, and they'd have to clean it out, and they couldn't wait too long, because if they waited too long, they could damage the actual inside brick of the furnace in there. So they would clean it out periodically. Super interesting how back in the day we were able to do things very primitively. I mean, could you imagine the labor and the man hours it would take to make this area? I mean, just that furnace. Crazy. Super interesting. I believe there's a little thing here that shows you how this works. Yeah, and yeah, here it is. So yeah, so you can see how this works. So essentially you would have the furnace, which is that, the whole big structure. And then off the back of the furnace, you would have a wooden structure that would have ran from like there over to there. And that's where they would load the limestone, the iron ore, the charcoal or coal. And then they would dump it into the furnace. And here's the water wheel. And the water wheel had the bellows, which really fired that up. And you can see here, you can see where they would load it in. You got your limestone, your iron ore, charcoal, and then you would have, you know, it melting down at the bottom and coming out. And if you look, I don't know if they show it. Oh, they do. It's kind of faded, but you see that dude right there? You see that? See how that looks like a mama pig and her piglets feeding? That's what they would do, and that's how they would get the raw iron ore. That's why they call it pig iron, for the mama pig. But yeah, that's it, baby. I started researching these over the summer. I was learning about them, and I wanted to see one up close and personal. And this is probably the best representation of one, because they recreated the internal brick structure, which is cool. Oh, here's another picture. So yeah, so you can see they would have like rail cars and bringing the iron ore in. And right here, that's the furnace right there. And you can see, and they have all these buildings and stuff, and in the backgrounds, and then there's that mountain peak right there. Oh, super neat.